I'm Alina, 28 female. I live with my fiancé, Alex, in a cozy two-bedroom apartment that we've slowly turned into our personal sanctuary. By day, I'm a financial analyst, a job that suits my personality perfectly. I find comfort in numbers, in spreadsheets where everything has its place and balances out. My life was a picture of careful planning and steady progress, culminating in the wedding I had been dreaming of since I was a little girl. But that carefully constructed picture was about to be shattered by the one person I should have been able to count on most, my own brother, and the parents who chose his mistakes over my future. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The dream wasn't extravagant, not in the way you see on television. It wasn't about a castle or a horse-drawn carriage. It was about a feeling. It was the feeling of standing under the ancient oak tree at the back of the local botanical gardens, the same place my grandparents had taken their wedding photos. It was the scent of blooming magnolias in late spring, the sound of a string quartet playing softly, and the sight of Alex's face as I walked toward him. This was the vision that had kept me going through long hours at work, the image that fueled my disciplined saving. For 5 years, I had meticulously managed my finances, funneling a portion of every paycheck into a high-yield savings account labeled wedding fund. It was my project, my creation. Alex, bless his heart, was just as dedicated. An architect with an eye for detail, he was designing our future home while I was designing the day we officially started that future. The fund had grown to just over $40,000. It was a substantial sum, one I was immensely proud of. It represented not just money, but discipline, sacrifice, and shared dreams. Every dollar was a skipped vacation, a dinner cooked at home instead of eaten out, a testament to our commitment. We had already put down deposits on the venue, the caterer, and the photographer. The binder on our coffee table was thick with fabric swatches, menu options, and seating charts. My dress was picked out, a simple, elegant A-line gown that made me feel like the best version of myself when I tried it on. The date was set for May 18th, 6 months away. Everything was on track, a perfect testament to my nature as a planner. My life was a series of well-laid bricks, and this wedding was the keystone that would complete the arch. My family, on the other hand, was less like a well-built structure and more like a constant, low-grade earthquake. My parents, Sharon and David, were good people, but they had one glaring blind spot: my younger brother, Ethan. At 24, Ethan was still coasting on a cloud of artistic ambition and adolescent irresponsibility. He was an aspiring musician who spent more time bartending to cover his immediate expenses than he did practicing his craft. He was perpetually in some sort of scrape, usually financial, and my parents were always there to catch him. A missed rent payment, a maxed-out credit card, a car repair he couldn't afford, they would sigh, lecture him gently, and then write a check. They called it supporting his dream. I called it enabling his inability to grow up. I loved my brother, but our relationship was strained by this dynamic. I saw him as a black hole for my parents' resources and emotional energy, while he saw me as rigid and judgmental. "Not everyone can be a numbers drone, Alina," he'd sneer whenever I suggested he create a budget. "Some of us have souls." It was a tired argument, and one that usually ended with my mother stepping in to say, Now, you two, be nice." Alex found the whole situation baffling. He came from a family where self-sufficiency was taught and expected. He tried to be supportive, but I could see the confusion in his eyes after every family dinner that devolved into a hushed discussion about Ethan's latest crisis. "I just don't get it," he'd say on the car ride home. "They're not helping him, they're crippling him." I knew he was right, but it was a truth my parents refused to see. Despite this, I had made a conscious effort to include Ethan in the wedding planning. He was my only sibling, after all. I asked him to be a groomsman, a role he accepted with a surprising amount of enthusiasm. "Totally, sis," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder. "I'll even wear a monkey suit for you." We'd even talked about him performing a song during the reception. For a brief, hopeful period, it felt like my wedding could be a bridge, a moment for our fractured family to come together and celebrate something positive. My parents were thrilled. My mom, Sharon, had thrown herself into the minutiae, helping me choose flower arrangements and cake flavors. My dad, David, a man of few words, would just pat my hand and say, "It's going to be a beautiful day, sweetie." The centerpiece of it all remained the fund. My parents knew about it, of course. They had even contributed a small amount for my 25th birthday, a gesture that had touched me deeply. They praised my financial prudence, often holding it up as an example to Ethan, which only deepened his resentment. "Elena's always been the responsible one," my dad would say, a statement meant as a compliment but one that always felt like a burden. It meant I was the one who didn't need help, the one who had it all figured out. I was the stable pillar, while Ethan was the flickering flame that needed constant tending. Little did I know that the pillar was about to be torn down to protect the flame from a storm of its own making. The dream in white, so carefully woven from threads of love and discipline, was about to be doused in the cold, harsh reality of my family's toxic loyalty. The call came on a Tuesday night. It was late, close to 11 p.m., and the kind of late that always signals bad news. Alex and I were on the couch, half watching a documentary and discussing the final details of our invitations. The soft glow of the television cast long shadows across our living room, a peaceful domestic scene. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with my mother's name. A knot of anxiety instantly tightened in my stomach. My mother never called this late unless it was an emergency. And in my family, emergency was a code word for Ethan. "I should get this," I said to Alex, my voice already tinged with weariness. He just nodded, his expression a mixture of sympathy and resignation. He knew the drill. "Hey, Mom, is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Her voice on the other end was a frantic whisper, thin and stretched with panic. "Elena? Oh, thank God, it's Ethan, he's in trouble. Real trouble this time." I sat up straight, the documentary fading into background noise. What happened? Is he hurt? As much as he frustrated me, he was still my brother. No, he's not hurt. He's been arrested." The words tumbled out in a rush, choked with a sob. "He's at the downtown precinct. Your father and I are here now. They set bail, Elena. It's high. It's so high." My mind raced. Arrested? Ethan had done stupid things before, gotten into bar fights, collected a few speeding tickets, but this was different. This was a new level of chaos. Arrested for what, Mom? There was a pause, a hesitant silence that spoke volumes. "It's complicated," she finally said. "There was a misunderstanding with his landlord about some property, and they found something in his car." "Something? What something?" I pressed, my patience wearing thin. Vague answers were another family specialty. "I can't get into it right now," she deflected, her voice cracking. "The point is, the bail is $40,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $40,000. It was an absurdly specific number, a chillingly familiar number. I felt the blood drain from my face. "40,000? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Mom, that's—" "I know, honey, I know," she cut in, her tone shifting from panic to pleading. "We don't have that kind of money just sitting around. Your father's pension is fixed, and our savings, well, you know how things have been, we just don't have it." I knew where this was going. The realization dawned on me slowly, a cold, creeping horror that started in my gut and spread through my veins. It was so audacious, so unthinkable that my brain initially refused to process it. "What are you asking, Mom?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Alex must have seen the look on my face. He muted the TV and sat forward, his eyes full of concern. "Elena," my mother's voice was now thick with a desperate sort of persuasion. "We need to get him out. He can't stay in there. You know how sensitive he is. This will break him. We need the money, just for a little while. We'll pay you back, I swear, as soon as this is all sorted out." The silence stretched on as I tried to form a response. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. She was asking for my wedding fund, my 5 years of discipline, my dream of the oak tree and the string quartet. She was asking me to trade my future for my brother's latest, and apparently greatest, mistake. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it left me breathless. "Mom," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't known I was capable of. "Are you asking me for my wedding money? For the $40,000 Alex and I have saved?" "It's not for us, it's for your brother," she cried, as if that made it any better. "He's your family. Family is supposed to help each other. We have to get him out tonight." I could hear my father's muffled voice in the background, likely telling her to be gentler. But the damage was done. The betrayal was absolute. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what the money represented. It was about the fact that in their moment of crisis, their first thought wasn't to find a loan, or sell something, or call a bail bondsman. Their first thought was me. Not me, their daughter, but my savings account. I was not a person to be respected. I was a resource to be tapped. My carefully built future was just an emergency fund for my brother's self-destruction. "No," I said, the word feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. "Absolutely not." A shocked silence followed. Then my mother's voice returned, laced with steel. "Elena, don't you be selfish. This is your brother's life we're talking about." "Selfish?" I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You're calling me selfish. You want to take the money for my wedding, the one you've been supposedly so excited about, to bail out your 24-year-old son for a crime you won't even name? That isn't selfish." "You don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly," I cut her off. "I understand that once again, Ethan's problems are more important than anything else. More important than my happiness, my future, my life with Alex. The answer is no, Mom. I'm not giving you the money." I ended the call before she could respond, my hand shaking so hard I could barely press the button. I dropped the phone on the couch and stared blankly at the dark TV screen. Alex moved to my side, wrapping an arm around me. "What was that about?" he asked gently. I turned to him, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling over. "They wanted the wedding fund," I whispered, the words feeling like poison in my mouth. "They wanted all of it, for Ethan's bail." His face hardened. "You're kidding me." I shook my head, sobbing into his shoulder. It felt like two crimes had been committed that night. One had landed my brother in a jail cell. The other had happened right here, in the safety of my own home, over a phone line. It was a crime of emotional theft, a betrayal so deep it fundamentally altered the way I saw my own family. They had tried to steal my dream, not with a weapon, but with a plea wrapped in the language of familial obligation. And in that moment, I knew that even if my brother walked free, something between me and my parents had just been locked away for good. The night of the phone call was sleepless. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my carefully constructed wedding plans turning to ash. I saw my mother's pleading face morphing into one of accusation, and my brother's smug grin, the one he always wore when he got away with something. Alex stayed up with me, a silent, solid presence in the storm of my emotions. He didn't offer easy platitudes or tell me what to do. He just held my hand, his quiet support a lifeline in the turbulent water. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. I had made my decision. The money was staying put. My boundary was drawn. I foolishly thought that would be the end of it. I expected angry phone calls, guilt trips, maybe even the silent treatment for a while. What I didn't expect was for my parents to find another way. What I didn't expect was for them to go behind my back and sacrifice my future anyway. The discovery came 2 days later. I had been avoiding my parents' calls, letting them go to voicemail where my mother would leave rambling, tearful messages about family and loyalty. I needed space to process the betrayal, to shore up my defenses. Alex and I had decided to move forward as planned. "It's our life, Elena," he'd said firmly. "Not theirs. We're not letting them ruin this." His strength was contagious, and I began to believe we could weather this. That Thursday, I had a meeting scheduled with the venue coordinator to finalize the menu. It was a joint account, the one we labeled Wedding Fund, but I managed the payments. I logged into the online banking portal to transfer the next deposit, my fingers moving automatically over the keyboard. It was a routine I had performed a dozen times. But this time, the screen that loaded made my heart stop. The balance was wrong. It wasn't just a little off. It was drastically, catastrophically wrong. Where there should have been a healthy figure just over $40,000, there was now a meager $217.34. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. It had to be a glitch, a system error. I refreshed the page. The number remained. I refreshed it again, and again, $217.34. The number mocked me from the screen. A cold, sickening dread washed over me. I clicked on the transaction history, my hands trembling, and there it was. A single wire transfer, dated the day after my mother's frantic call. An outgoing payment of exactly $40,000. The recipient was a bail bonds company. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air in my home office suddenly felt thin and suffocating. The careful logic of my financial analyst brain shut down, replaced by a raw, primal scream of disbelief and violation. How? How was this possible? And then I remembered. When I first opened the account, back when I was younger and more naive, I had put my mother on it as a cosigner. It was a just-in-case measure, a safety net I never in a million years imagined would be used against me. In the 5 years since, I had completely forgotten about it. But she hadn't. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. When I said no, they hadn't given up. They had simply bypassed me. They had walked into the bank and taken the money anyway. They had drained my entire wedding fund, every last cent of my and Alex's hard-earned savings, to bail out their delinquent son. The betrayal from the phone call was a paper cut compared to this gaping wound. This was theft. I don't remember picking up my phone. I don't remember dialing my mother's number. The next thing I knew, I was listening to it ring, each tone drilling deeper into my skull. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautiously cheerful. "Elena? Hi, sweetie. I'm so glad you called." "You stole my money," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. The rage was so immense it had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard emptiness. The cheerful facade vanished. "Now, Elena, don't use that word. We didn't steal it. We borrowed it. We are going to pay it back. You went behind my back and took $40,000 from my account after I explicitly told you no. That is the definition of stealing, Mom." "It was a family emergency," she insisted, her voice rising. "What were we supposed to do? Let your brother rot in jail? He was scared, Elena. I had to make a choice, and I chose my son." I chose my son. The words hung in the air between us, a final, definitive severing of a bond I once thought was unbreakable. She chose him over me, his mistake over my milestone, his comfort over my future. "What about my wedding?" I asked, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to remain calm. "The deposits, the venue, what were you thinking?" "We can postpone," she said, her tone suddenly practical, as if she were discussing rescheduling a dentist appointment. "Or you and Alex can have a smaller ceremony. A courthouse wedding is lovely, and so much more practical, really. All that fuss for one day, it's a waste when you think about it. This was more important." A practical sacrifice. That's what it was to her. My dream, my 5 years of planning, my one perfect day, it was an impractical fuss that could be easily sacrificed for the more important business of cleaning up Ethan's mess. The condescension in her voice, the utter dismissal of my feelings, was more painful than the financial loss. She wasn't even sorry. She was rationalizing. She had convinced herself that she was the hero of this story, the selfless mother making a tough choice, and I was the selfish daughter who couldn't see the bigger picture. "Get Dad on the phone," I demanded. There was a shuffling sound, and then my father's hesitant voice came on the line. "Elena." "Did you know about this?" I asked. "Did you go with her to the bank and sign away my future?" "Sweetie, your mother explained the situation," he began, his voice weak and full of excuses. "We couldn't just leave him there. It's a loan. We'll figure it out." "You'll figure it out?" I echoed, my voice rising to a shout. "How? By the time you pay back $40,000 on your fixed income, Alex and I will be celebrating our 10th anniversary. You didn't just borrow the money, you stole our wedding. You stole this moment from us. From me. Family has to make sacrifices, he mumbled, reciting the line I'm sure my mother had fed him. No, I said, the cold resolve returning. I have always been the one to make sacrifices. I sacrificed my time, my energy, my social life to build that fund. You sacrificed nothing. You sacrificed me. You sacrificed my trust. You sacrificed any relationship we had left. Don't call me again. Don't text me. We are done. I hung up the phone and finally let myself break. I slid down the wall in my office and wept. I wept for the money, for the wedding, but mostly, I wept for the girl who had believed her parents loved her unconditionally. Because in the span of 2 days, I had discovered that their love was entirely conditional. And the condition was that I had to be willing to set myself on fire to keep their favorite child warm. The days following the discovery were a blur of grief and rage. The first, most painful task was dismantling the dream. I called the venue, the caterer, the photographer, and explained that the wedding was off. Each call was a fresh wave of humiliation, my voice cracking as I forfeited our deposits, watching thousands of dollars, money that was no longer mine, vanish into cancellation fees. Alex was my rock. He handled the emails I couldn't bring myself to write and held me when the weight of it all became too much. He was angry, furious at my parents, but his PR. Amari focus was on me. We'll get married, he promised, his hands holding my face, forcing me to look at him. If it's just you and me and a judge at City Hall, we will get married. They can't take us. He was right, but it was a cold comfort. The joy and excitement had been replaced by a bitter sense of violation. My family had imploded. I stuck to my word and blocked my parents' numbers. They resorted to emailing long, rambling messages filled with self-pity and justifications. They painted themselves as victims of circumstance, forced to make an impossible choice. They never once offered a genuine apology. Ethan, the cause of all this, was silent. I assumed he was out of jail, living his life, completely oblivious or, more likely, completely indifferent to the wreckage he had caused. The silence from him was perhaps the most damning evidence of all. He didn't care. He had never cared. About a week after I'd discovered the theft, when the initial shock had subsided and hardened into a cold, simmering anger, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was my parents trying to get through on a different line. But something made me answer. "Am I speaking with Alina?" A man's professional voice asked. "This is she," I replied cautiously. "My name is Detective Russo. I'm with the City Police Department. I was the arresting officer on your brother's, Ethan's, case last week." My blood ran cold. My first thought was that he was in trouble again. Is everything all right? "Everything's fine on my end," he said calmly. "I'm calling because I'm preparing the official report for the district attorney's office, and a few things aren't adding up. Your brother isn't being very cooperative, and his story has some significant holes in it. His parents mentioned your name during their interview, and I was hoping you might be able to provide some clarity on a few points." I was stunned. Why would my parents mention me, and what could I possibly know? "I'm not sure how I can help," I said honestly. "I haven't spoken to my brother since before his arrest." "I understand," Detective Russo said. His tone was patient, practiced. "This is about the items he was found with. He was arrested for grand theft, Otto. He was found driving a stolen vehicle. But that's not the main issue. The main issue is what was in the trunk." He paused. He had several $1,000s worth of stolen musical equipment. Amplifiers, high-end guitars, mixing boards. The property was reported stolen from a local music studio 2 nights before his arrest. My stomach churned. This was far more serious than a misunderstanding with his landlord. This was a felony, multiple felonies. "His claim," the detective continued, "is that he bought the equipment from a guy in a parking lot, a cash deal. He says he paid for it with money from his family. Specifically, he claims his parents recently gave him a large sum of money as an early inheritance to invest in his career. However, your parents are telling a slightly different story. They claim they gave him the money, yes, but that it was a loan from their savings. The timelines are fuzzy, and frankly, neither story feels quite right. The amount they're talking about is substantial. It raises flags. My mind was reeling. A large sum of money, a loan, an early inheritance. It was all lies, a tangled web of deceit designed to cover his tracks. But they had used a kernel of truth, my money. They were using the existence of my stolen wedding fund as the basis for their alibi. The audacity was breathtaking. "Detective," I began, my voice trembling with a new, focused anger. "They are lying to you, all of them." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "Go on," Russo said, his interest clearly piqued. And so I told him. I told him everything. I explained the 5 years of saving, the $40,000 wedding fund, the dream venue. I told him about the frantic late-night call from my mother, my refusal to hand over the money, and my subsequent discovery that she had taken it anyway, as a cosigner on the account. I explained that the money wasn't a loan or an inheritance for Ethan. It was my future, and they had stolen it from me to pay his bail for the very crimes he was now trying to lie his way out of. As I spoke, the narrative flowed out of me, clear and precise. My grief was replaced by the cold, hard logic of my profession. I laid out the facts, the dates, the amounts. I was a financial analyst presenting a case, and the evidence was irrefutable. When I finished, Detective Russo was quiet for a long time. I could hear the faint sound of typing in the background. "Ms. Parker," he finally said, his voice imbued with a new sense of gravity. "This changes things. This provides a motive and a timeline that they've been deliberately obscuring. Your brother wasn't just found with stolen goods. He was found with them right after his primary source, F income, his family, had been cut off by you. He gets desperate, he commits a crime, and then your parents use the very money you denied them to cover it up, creating a false narrative for us in the process." "Yes," I said, the word a simple, solid confirmation. "The district attorney is going to be very interested in this," he continued. "Your testimony could be crucial. It would establish a pattern of behavior and dismantle the defense they're trying to build. It would show that your brother isn't some struggling artist who made a bad deal, but someone who likely committed a serious crime and then relied on his parents to lie for him. We have him on the car theft and possession of stolen property, but your testimony could help secure a much stronger conviction, perhaps even leading to charges of obstruction against your parents." A strange sense of calm washed over me. This was it. This was the crossroads. I could remain a victim, a casualty of my family's dysfunction, and let them get away with their lies, or I could take a stand. I could use the one thing I had left, the truth. My parents had made their choice. They had chosen their son. Now I had a choice to make. "Would you be willing to come down to the station and give a formal statement?" Detective Russo asked. "And potentially testify if this goes to trial." I looked around my apartment at the empty space on the coffee table where the wedding binder used to be. I thought of the canceled caterer, the lost deposits, the dress I would never wear. I thought of my mother's dismissive voice telling me a courthouse ceremony was more practical. They had sacrificed my happiness for his freedom. Now, an officer of the law was asking me to sacrifice my brother for the truth. It wasn't even a choice. It was an inevitability. It was justice. "Yes, detective," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I would. When do you need me?" The meeting with Detective Russo was a turning point. Walking into the police station felt surreal, like stepping onto the set of a television drama. But there was nothing dramatic about the process. It was methodical, quiet, and professional. I sat in a small, sterile interview room and laid out the entire story for a second time, while Russo took meticulous notes. I provided bank statements showing the years of deposits into the wedding fund and the single, devastating withdrawal of $40,000 made by my mother. The paper trail was undeniable. It was a clear, factual narrative of discipline, betrayal, and theft. Detective Russo listened intently, his expression unreadable. When I was finished, he looked over his notes, then looked at me. "Your testimony is powerful, Alina," he said, using my first name for the first time. "It paints a very clear picture for the DA. It establishes motive, exposes their lies, and demonstrates a pattern of enabling behavior that culminated in serious felonies. They tried to use your money as a smokescreen, but you've just turned it into a spotlight." Leaving the station, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. The grief and helplessness that had consumed me for weeks began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard sense of purpose. My parents had made their choice. They had chosen to protect my brother at my expense. Now, I would choose to protect myself and the truth at theirs. The plan wasn't complex. It didn't involve elaborate schemes or theatrical confrontations. The plan was simple. I would let the legal system do its work. My role was to be the perfect witness, calm, factual, and unshakable. The next few weeks were quiet. I didn't hear from my family, and I didn't reach out. I assumed they were busy with lawyers, constructing a defense based on the lies they had told the police. They had no idea that their entire alibi had been dismantled by the very person whose sacrifice was supposed to make it possible. Alex and I began to talk about the future again, but in a different way. The grand wedding was gone, but the foundation of our relationship felt stronger than ever. We decided we would get married at the courthouse on our original date, May 18th. It would be a quiet affair, just us and two of our closest friends as witnesses. It wasn't the wedding I had dreamed of, but it would be ours, untainted by family drama and financial ruin. The call came from the district attorney's office about a month later. It was an assistant DA named Ms. Chen. She informed me that based on my statement and the evidence I provided, they were moving forward with the prosecution of my brother, Ethan, on charges of grand theft auto and possession of stolen property. But she had more news. "Given the deliberate misinformation provided by your parents, Sharon and David," she explained in a businesslike tone, "and the financial evidence you provided which directly contradicts their statements, we are also considering charges of obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact." I felt a jolt. I had known this was a possibility, but hearing it stated so plainly made it real. They could face criminal charges themselves. "What does that mean for them?" I asked. "It could mean fines, probation, or even jail time, depending on the judge," Ms. Chen replied. "Frankly, your parents' actions created a significant impediment to the initial investigation. Lying to a detective to cover up a felony is something we take very seriously." She then explained the next steps. Ethan's lawyer had been informed of the new evidence, my testimony. They were being given the option to accept a plea bargain. If Ethan pleaded guilty to the charges, the DA's office might be willing to be lenient on my parents, perhaps reducing their charges to a misdemeanor with a fine. "His lawyer will be advising him to take the deal," Ms. Chen said. "Your testimony is a slam dunk for the prosecution, and they know it. It completely guts their defense. The alternative is for him to go to trial, where you will testify against him, and he will almost certainly be convicted and face a much harsher sentence, likely dragging your parents down with him." The choice was now Ethan's. He could take responsibility for his actions to protect his parents, or he could gamble in court, forcing a public confrontation where I would lay bare all the family secrets. I knew my brother. His survival instinct, his selfishness, was his most dominant trait. I felt a grim certainty that he would take the deal. He would never risk a longer sentence for himself just to save our parents from the consequences of their own actions. He was his own keeper, and no one else's. A week later, Ms. Chen called back to confirm my suspicion. Ethan had accepted the plea deal. He would plead guilty to both charges. In exchange for his plea and cooperation, the prosecution had agreed to reduce the charges against my parents to a single misdemeanor count of obstruction, punishable by a significant fine and 2 years of probation. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for May 18th. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. May 18th, my wedding day. The day I was supposed to be standing under an oak tree in a white dress would now be the day my brother stood before a judge to be sentenced for his crimes. My parents, who had told me a courthouse ceremony was more practical, would now be in a courthouse for a very different and much more somber occasion. I told Alex the news, and he just shook his head in disbelief. "You can't make this stuff up," he said. "We don't have to change our date," I said, a new resolve in my voice. "In fact, I don't want to. Let's keep it." He looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face as he understood. "You want to get married on the same day he gets sentenced?" "Yes," I said. "They took my big wedding. They told me to go to the courthouse. So that's what we'll do. We'll go to the courthouse on our day. We'll sign our papers, say our vows, and start our life together. And somewhere in that same building, my brother will be facing the consequences of his actions, and my parents will be watching, forced to confront the mess they made." They wanted a practical courthouse event on May 18th. They're going to get one. The plan had evolved. It was no longer just about letting justice run its course. It was about reclaiming my day. It was about turning a symbol of my loss into a symbol of my victory. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was the architect of my own justice, and the foundation was being laid in the one place they never thought I'd have the strength to meet them, the courthouse. My brother's keeper? No. From now on, I was my own. May 18th arrived not with the gentle spring warmth I had imagined, but with a cool, overcast sky that seemed to mirror my mood. Somber, but clear. I didn't wear the elegant A-line gown from the bridal shop. Instead, I chose a simple, cream-colored sheath dress. It was sophisticated, powerful, and utterly devoid of the naive romanticism I once cherished. Alex looked handsome and steady in a sharp navy suit. Our witnesses were my best friend, Sarah, and his, a man named Ben. There was no string quartet, no fragrant magnolias, just the four of us, standing together in shared purpose. We arrived at the county courthouse an hour before our scheduled appointment with the justice of the peace. The building was a formidable granite structure, its halls echoing with the quiet, serious business of the law. As we walked toward the clerk's office on the second floor, we passed the hallway leading to the criminal courtrooms. And that's when I saw them. My parents and Ethan were huddled together on a wooden bench, looking small and defeated under the high ceilings. My father's face was gray, his shoulders slumped. My mother was wringing her hands, her expression a mask of anxiety. And Ethan, he looked like a child playing dress-up in his ill-fitting suit. He had lost his customary swagger. All the smug confidence was gone, replaced by a sullen, resentful fear. They hadn't seen us yet. They were trapped in their own little bubble of misery. "Let's just keep walking," Alex murmured, putting a protective arm around my waist. "No," I said softly, stopping in my tracks. "Not yet." I needed them to see me. This wasn't about gloating or seeking a dramatic, screaming confrontation. It was about something quieter and more profound. It was about showing them that I was not broken, that my life was moving forward, not in spite of them, but because I had chosen to move past them. I took a deep breath and walked toward them, Alex at my side. My mother looked up first. Her eyes widened in shock, first at seeing me, then at my cream dress, then at Alex in his suit and the small, simple bouquet of lilies Sarah was holding for me. The comprehension dawned on her face, a slow, painful wave of realization. My father saw her expression and followed her gaze. His jaw went slack. Ethan was the last to look up, his eyes flickering with confusion before settling into a familiar, resentful glare. "Elena," my mother whispered, her voice hoarse, "what are you doing here?" "It's May 18th, I said, my voice calm and even. "It's my wedding day. You told me a courthouse ceremony was more practical, remember? I decided you were right." The color drained from her face. She looked from me to Ethan, then back to me, the horrific irony of the situation finally crashing down on her. Her son's sentencing and her daughter's wedding happening in the same building on the same day. The practical sacrifice made manifest. You planned this," she stammered, a note of accusation in her voice. "I didn't plan for my brother to be a felon," I replied coolly. "I didn't plan for my parents to steal from me and then lie to the police. I planned a wedding. You're the ones who changed the venue." My father finally found his voice. "Elena, please," he pleaded, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Not today. We're about to go in there," and his voice broke. "And what?" I pressed, not unkindly but firmly. Face the consequences of your actions, the choices you made. You chose to enable him his whole life. You chose to steal my future to pay for his mistake. You chose to lie to law enforcement to protect him. Every single step that led you to that bench was a choice you made. I'm just making mine. Ethan, who had been silent until now, finally snapped. So this is your big revenge, huh? He sneered, a pathetic attempt to regain some of his old bluster. You ruin my life, and then you show up here to rub it in my face. I turned my full attention to him. Ruin your life? I didn't steal a car, Ethan. I didn't steal thousands of dollars of equipment. I didn't build a web of lies that my parents got tangled in. You did all of that on your own. I just told the truth. For the first time in this family, someone told the truth and you can't handle it. You're not angry at me, you're angry that your safety net is finally gone. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. There was nothing more to say. The confrontation was over. There was no screaming, no satisfying cinematic moment of breakdown. There was only the quiet, devastating weight of the truth hanging in the air between us. I looked at my parents one last time. In their eyes, I saw shock, grief, and a flicker of something that might have been shame, but there was no apology, not even now. Our appointment is in 10 minutes, I said to Alex, turning my back on my family. We should go. As we walked away, I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me, 3 pairs of eyes representing my entire past, but I was walking toward my future. Our ceremony was short and simple. We stood before the justice of the peace, a kind woman with warm eyes, and exchanged our vows. They weren't the elaborate promises we had written for the garden wedding, but they were real and heartfelt. We promised to be partners, to be honest, to be each other's sanctuary. They were unspoken vows, too. A promise to build a new family on a foundation of trust and respect, to leave the toxicity of the past behind. When we were pronounced husband and wife, Alex kissed me, and in that kiss, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. The hole that my family had carved into my life was still there, but it no longer felt like a gaping wound. It was a scar, a reminder of a battle I had survived. As we left the courthouse, hand in hand, a married couple, I glanced back at the doors to the criminal wing. My brother was in there, receiving his sentence. My parents were in there, receiving theirs. We were all in the same building, fulfilling the destinies we had chosen. They had chosen a path of deceit and enabling, and it had led them to a defendant's table. I had chosen a path of truth and self-respect, and it had led me here to the first day of the rest of my life with a man I loved. It wasn't the wedding I had dreamed of, but it was the one I had earned. We found out later that day what happened in the courtroom. Our friend Ben, who was a paralegal, looked up the public record for us. Ethan was sentenced to 18 months in state prison with eligibility for parole after 12. The judge had been firm, citing his lack of remorse and the calculated nature of the theft. My parents, Sharon and David, were fined $10,000 each and sentenced to 2 years of probation, during which they were required to attend family counseling, separately. The judge had apparently lectured them sternly on the destructive nature of their enabling, calling their actions a profound disservice to both of their children. The $40,000 bail money was, of course, gone for good, absorbed by the legal system. They had lost everything and protected no one. Our own celebration was modest. We went to a nice restaurant with Sarah and Ben, had a wonderful meal, and toasted our new life together. It felt authentic and deeply meaningful. The absence of my family was a quiet, background hum, not a roaring silence. For the first time, I felt a sense of closure. I hadn't sought revenge in a traditional sense. I had simply demanded accountability. The consequences were a natural result of their own choices. In the weeks and months that followed, Alex and I focused on building our new foundation. We started a new savings account, this one labeled Future Fund. It wasn't for a party or a single day. It was for a down payment on a house, for travel, for a life built together. Each deposit felt like an act of healing, a reclamation of our ability to plan and dream. The process was slower this time, but it was ours alone. There were no co-signers. About 6 months after the sentencing, I received a letter. It was from my mother. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened. I had held firm on my no-contact rule, and my life had been calmer and healthier for it. But curiosity, or perhaps a lingering flicker of hope for the mother I once knew, made me open it. The letter was not what I expected. It was not full of justifications or accusations. It was short, and the handwriting was shaky. She wrote that the court-mandated therapy was difficult, but that it was forcing her and my father to confront truths they had avoided for decades. She admitted that their entire parenting dynamic had been built around managing Ethan's instability, and in doing so, they had taken my stability for granted, treating me less like a daughter and more like a utility. She used a word I never thought I would hear from her: sorry. "I am sorry for the money," she wrote, "but I am most sorry for making you feel that our love for you was conditional. It was our weakness, not your worth, that caused this. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive us." It was the apology I had needed to hear, but it didn't magically heal the wound. Forgiveness felt like a distant country I wasn't ready to visit. I showed the letter to Alex. He read it and simply said, "It's a start, but it doesn't mean you owe them anything." He was right. An apology wasn't a key that automatically unlocked the door to my life. It was just a knock, one I could choose to answer or ignore. For now, I chose to just listen to it, to acknowledge it, and to continue focusing on my own peace. I never heard from Ethan directly. I learned through a distant aunt that he was not handling prison well, that he felt betrayed by everyone, a victim to the end. He still couldn't see his own role in his downfall. I felt a flicker of pity for him, for the man-child my parents had created, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of the pain he had caused. He was on his own path now, and it was nowhere near mine. 2 years later, Alex and I bought our first house. It was a small but charming bungalow with a big oak tree in the backyard. As we stood on the lawn, holding the keys, I thought of the wedding I had lost. The dream of getting married under an oak tree was gone, but here I was, standing with my husband, ready to build a life in the shade of one. Life had a funny, often painful, way of coming full circle. My relationship with my parents is still a work in progress. After a year of no contact, I finally agreed to meet them in a neutral space, a coffee shop. They are different now, quieter, more hesitant, the blind certainty of their convictions shattered. They are slowly, painstakingly trying to rebuild not just their lives, but themselves. They have started to pay back the money, a small amount each month, a symbolic gesture I neither asked for nor expected. We don't have the easy relationship we once did, and perhaps we never will. The trust, once obliterated, is being rebuilt brick by painful brick. But for the first time, our relationship feels honest. My happily ever after is not the fairy tale I once planned. It is something quieter, more resilient, and infinitely more real. It's a peaceful evening at home with Alex, the sound of our law utter filling the rooms. It's the pride I feel when I look at our growing savings account, a testament to our partnership. And it's the strength I found in myself when I chose truth over tradition and self-respect over a toxic definition of family. I lost a wedding, but I gained myself. And that, I've discovered, is a much better foundation upon which to build a life.